All right. Thanks for joining, watching when you get to. Here is Samwise joining as well. Put him on this side. Here we go. Samwise. There we go. So we're doing our part 4. And this is going to be a character study. Another Old Testament Mordecai. Again, looking for some options, and Mordecai is the one that I'm going to pick in here. And I think Mordecai, again, when I look, I highly encourage look at what's not said as much as what is said. This Mordecai takes place in Esther. So again, the background of Esther is Esther is rounded up. The king of Persia is getting rid of his queen because he doesn't like how she responded. Set up, not set up, but gets rid of the queen. Esther's rounded up, put in with the group. The king falls for her or chooses her, however you want to take it, and she becomes queen. The book is Esther, not Mordecai. But what is Mordecai's role? Esther 2. All my scriptures are in ESV. 2:5. Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, who Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So, in the second chapter of Esther, we see the introduction of who Mordecai is, a cousin to Esther, whom he raises as his own daughter. Ages are not given, so we just have what we have. Mordecai is one of the exiles carried away by Nebuchadnezzar from Jerusalem, giving us the idea that Mordecai had some skills that were very useful, relating to 2 Kings 24:10-16. It talks about how Nebuchadnezzar had picked individuals of skills to bring them back. So Mordecai was picked. Probably also similar to the group with Daniel. There is not much more to the backstory of Mordecai and Esther than we gather from the scripture, but we can see much about them as the rest of the book of Esther unfolds. We will have a chance to take a look at the devoted Jew and seeing how he took his service to a foreign human king and how he interpreted the best methods to serve his people. Esther 2:10. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. 11. And every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. So Esther's been taken. And so Mordecai took his role of being a family to Esther very seriously. The king takes the women, rounds them up to find this new king. Mordecai could not stop Esther from being taken, as she fit the king's requirements. So he took the next best thing. We see that he walked by the court every day to see how Esther was doing, checking on her, doing the best he could. Perhaps if something occurred, he believed he could find a way to help. But to our knowledge, nothing wrong occurred. So we just move on. Mordecai didn't fight, yell, scream, protest, anything like that. He accepted and did the best he could. Esther 2:19 through 23. Now, when the virgins were gathered together at the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her kindred or her people as Mordecai had commanded her. For Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther. And Esther told the king, in the name of Mordecai, when the affair was investigated and found out to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows. And it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. So again, as Esther's now been picked, and Mordecai's just hanging out in the area, and he knows these two individuals, and he discovers there's a plot to kill the king, Esther's new husband. He's a foreign king holding Israel and the Jews there. Probably not always being treated well, but he serves the kingdom he's in. Mordecai remains a Jew, remembering who he was, but still follows the rules. Esther 4:13. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do you think to yourself that in the king's palace? So at this point, did I skip that part? Did. So I know what I was doing. Sorry. So we come to the part where the plot to kill the Jews comes out. So this deed of his is recorded, and we'll see the next part. Esther 4:13 through 17. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do you not think for yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than any of the other Jews? For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, nights, or days. And I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. So he's serving the king. Fast forward some. The king's ordered the Jews to be killed. And he's saying flat out, Esther, you don't know if you weren't picked to be queen for this moment. But Mordecai's not saying no plot, no manipulation. Stand up and go to him. And she finally accepts and goes, we need prayer and fasting. So Mordecai in service. He's a Jew in a foreign land, serving people that is not his, making others prosper. However, we find in chapter 2 that Esther has been picked, and during his daily sitting at the king's gate, finds out the king's staff wants to kill him, like I said earlier. And this gets passed on to the book. In chapter 3, where the plot to kill the Jews is released, we find a new relationship between Esther and Mordecai. They're co-laborers. Mordecai was looking out for her best interest, and now they're co-laboring together for God's good. And those that are in Susa and the kingdom that are Jewish. We find that Mordecai challenges Esther. Sorry. that he straight up challenges her. If you don't do this, God's going to basically kill you and he'll find another one to save us. Where he could just command her earlier. Now he's not commanding her. Because Esther 2:10. Esther had not made known her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. So going from that father to we're co-laborers. Mordecai gives a short summation that perhaps God's grace was on the who to get her in that place. But was she willing to risk what she did not do to earn? Remember, we don't have an account of her doing anything overly fantastic to become queen. The king picks her, end of story. And there's a scripture that rulers, princes, God can influence the heart. But Mordecai truly believes in the desire of God to save his people. Regardless of what's happened, he believes they are not to be eradicated. So after an unknown time, he goes out to get people fasting as directed by Esther. I'm sorry about that. After the unknown time, he goes out, gets those people. Mordecai is employed, asked to do this on behalf of Esther, but remains following the law. Esther 3:2 through 6. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why, who do you transgress the king's command?" And when the people spoke to him day after day, he would not listen to them. They told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. 6. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, so as they had made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. Sorry. So Esther 3, we get the plot. Haman doesn't seek to kill the Jews. He's going to punish Mordecai by killing his people. Esther 4, when Mordecai, this is 1 through 8. Yeah, 8. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city. And he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. So the plot has been unleashed to kill the Jews. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province where the king's command and his decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's young women and her eunuchs came and told her the queen was deeply distressed, she sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off the sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed to attend her, and he ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai told him what had happened to him, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasury for the destruction of Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her and command her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. So, don't tell anyone. At the very end, tell them Tell him you're a Jew and he's killing his queen and wife. We see in this section how Mordecai remained true to himself and his beliefs. Mordecai is not recorded if he bowed before the king or Haman, but it is clear he did not for Haman. And we don't know how many times. Mordecai refuses to bow to him, and we find out over the course of time, Haman acts to kill the Jews to punish Mordecai. He gets a written document from the king, signed, sealed. He can do this. So Mordecai, as a Jew, seeking God, you put on sackcloth and ashes to mourn and weep. And he's doing this at the king's entrance. Not allowed to cross over, and he doesn't. Esther sees it and hears about it, tries to get him to dress properly, and that's when the eunuch she uses to get connected with him and discover why is he doing this. Again, no one's saying, no, don't do this. Here, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? There's communication. From this section, look at how Mordecai retained his ways as a Jew while serving a foreign kingdom. He did not encroach on some such laws. He didn't say, well, this is what works for me, and I'm not going to do that. He obeyed and respected the laws while also respecting and obeying who he was. Too often nowadays, someone will act a certain way in violating the laws or the rules of the land because of what they believe or their own causes of righteousness. Mordecai sets a different example for us to follow. He's not trying to break the rules or make things happen. He's respecting the rules and working within them. And praying. And Haman, Esther 5:9. And Haman went out that day, joyful and glad at heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he neither rose nor trembled before him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and brought his friend and his wife Zeresh. And Haman recounted to them the splendor of his riches and the number of his sons, all the promotions which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced above the officials and the servants to the king. And Haman said, even Queen Esther, let no one but me come with the king's feast she prepared, and tomorrow also I am invited to buy her together with the king. Yet all this is worth nothing to me, for as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends had said, let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hung upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. This idea pleased Haman, and he had a gallows made. So again, he's just irritated over everything Mordecai is doing. Haman has plotted and made his way known and made all the right connections to get where he is. Mordecai, just plugging along. Esther 6:3. And the king said, what honor and distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? The king's young men who attended him said nothing has been done for him. So the king finds out that he's never rewarded Mordecai for his duty and saving the king's life. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace, and to speak to the king about having Mordecai hung on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's young men told him, Haman is here, standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what should be done to a man whom the king delights and honors? And Haman said to himself, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? To himself. So he's thinking, this is all about me. And Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, I let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown is set. And let the robes and his horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor. and let them lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, this shall it be done to the man whom the king delights in honor. The king then tells Haman, hurry, take the robes and the horse, and you say, and do this all to Mordecai the Jew. So think about that. He is rewarding someone he's about given permission to eradicate. Does he really know who he asked to eradicate? Probably not by this. Leave out nothing that you have mentioned. So he goes and does it. Now we get to the end. Esther 8:1. On that day, King Assyrius gave the Queen Esther the house of Haman. So this all blows up, and this is the resolution. Esther gets Haman's house. Everything comes out, and Haman dies, and his house is given to Esther, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came before the king. For Esther had told him that it was he was to her. So now he knows Mordecai is linked to Esther and is like a father. And the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Esther 10:1. King Assyrius imposed taxes on the land and on the coastlands of the sea, and all the acts of his power and might, and the full account of the high honor of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him. Are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia, a book we don't have? For Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Assyrius, and he was great among the Jews and popular with the multitude of his brothers. For he sought the welfare of his people and spoke peace to all his people. There is much here for consideration. However, instead of recapping these scriptures, let me point to the idea that I feel we should focus on. This is what I want you to walk away with. Mordecai was a man who was not like those around him. He was from a foreign land, and we can extrapolate that he had a job in the king's court or something pretty high. He did not go about proclaiming who he was. He wasn't saying, I'm a Jew, I'm better. I'm a Christian, I follow Christ, I know more than you. You get the idea, I hope. He was from being that foreign land, different. He did not go about proclaiming all this, but he could be a good citizen of the Persian kingdom. He did what he was necessary. He worked, he had a job, he served, he saved the king. It was not until being put into a place that challenged his beliefs and faith that in God that he became singled out. Would he bow or not to Haman? He wasn't God and he wasn't the king. Through a series of events, all that was planned for Mordecai, up to his planned death by Haman. He was going to be killed before the Jews were. And so we people often compromise. We're doing things we know we should not because it's the world. We do things that it's not acceptable to God. And we put it off and we reason it away and explain it away and make ourselves feel better. It doesn't change the fact we didn't do it. It is us who need to hold the line of faith despite the cost. It might be our jobs, our family, life. Who knows? It is by our faith and our convictions that we achieve more than what we are. Mordecai's case, without any record, spoken, desire, or belief, he receives gifts and honors destined for the one who was his enemy in Haman. He got Haman's house. He is ruling it. Haman's stuff's his now. Haman plotted to kill him. Haman plotted to kill his people because he refused to bow down. He lived his convictions, not forcing other people to do it, not like you need to be like us. He just lived his life. The plan to eliminate the Jews falls short because they are permitted to defend themselves from elimination, and Mordecai is raised to the seat that Haman once possessed, second in command of the kingdom. The plans of man is to manipulate and capture others in plots and plans. That's what Haman does. Haman is constantly trying to figure out how to get ahead, how to keep it, and how to kill his enemies. We can only think that of what we know or believe. God knows the facts. We need to have faith and live our conviction and beliefs. No one said you had to be like or think like another. Groupthink leads to similar ideas. And what I mean by groupthink is we all think the same thing, so it must be right. No, you all could be wrong. Do you live in a way where you could be wrong, or are you always right? And are you always right because you have evidence to say it, or people just, that one's a complicated one, I know. But the faith and room that you could be wrong. You never know. So, groupthink, similar ideas, but it is the independent body life of Christ that leads to the wholeness for which each have a part. Do you all want to be a thumb? We all need to be us. What I mean by us, we're all unique. Don't judge yourself based on someone else. You need to be you and God. That's where you start, and that's where you begin. Sometimes what we think makes us special and unique. And sometimes the limiting factor in our life becomes our weakness. A balanced life, a balanced view brings the wholeness together instead of being lopsided, instead of going tipsy because I'm pulling down this arm. Balance. No, more of this. Now I'm not sitting up straight. No, not sitting up straight. No, not sitting up straight. Balance. Takes time, takes practice, takes spending time with God. Start with prayer, end in prayer. Hope you've had something that's resonated inside of you. Mordecai, I think, is a great character. So much there. He lives without pushing his beliefs on another and shoving it in their face. Peace and blessings to you. Take care.